Poltergeist activity has been recorded throughout history and is probably the most prolific of all supernatural events. It really can be terrifying enough when a poltergeist makes its presence known within a household. Activity often proceeds with knocks and bangs on the doors and walls. Household items will start disappearing and then reappearing, often in a completely different place. Furniture has been reported moving of its own accord. Stones, pebbles, and even rocks have reportedly been thrown around a property. This is surely enough to strike fear in the hearts of anybody unfortunate enough to encounter such activity. However, when a poltergeist finds its voice and starts to communicate verbally, you know things have decidedly taken a turn for the worst. And if you weren't already concerned, then you probably should be. This is the case of the Bingen poltergeist. Poltergeist phenomena is often placed in the same niche as ghosts and hauntings. The implication is that a poltergeist is a ghost, i.e. a human that has died and returned in spirit form. Now, while there is no doubt that there are similarities between ghosts and poltergeist activity, a haunting by a ghost or spirit often tends to have the visual element. For example, a glowing figure dressed in old-fashioned clothes is seen walking down a hallway, maybe even through a solid wall or closed door. A haunting also repeats in the same way on a regular basis, much like a recording that is played back over and over again. In long-term ghostly hauntings, a ghost will usually ignore entreaties from the living and shows no signs of awareness of its surroundings. Poltergeist activity, on the other hand, operates in a completely different fashion. A poltergeist almost never makes an appearance as a visible apparition. There have of course been exceptions, but these are few and far between. A poltergeist demonstrates the ability and willingness to interact with the physical world. Documented cases have shown reports of poltergeists moving heavy furniture, instantaneously teleporting personal items, producing loud, sometimes explosive sounds, dispelling foul and disgusting odours, often described as a rotten egg smell. They've been known to produce puddles of water inside a building, cause spontaneous fires, and plenty of other types of phenomena that seem to defy the laws of physics. A poltergeist is extremely aware of its surroundings, and will often quickly respond to suggestions by observers and other external stimuli. This demonstrates that there is some level of intelligence and intention behind the activity, and not just some random acts of psychokinesis. Now, this intelligence, along with the ability to communicate, will manifest in a myriad of different ways. Pieces of paper with strange messages turn up out of nowhere. Writing will appear on the walls. Children's toys will be arranged to make words, and perhaps the most disturbing of all, they will sometimes start to communicate verbally. Just imagine relaxing for the night, ready to watch your favourite TV show, when all of a sudden, a voice emerges from the dark corner of the room. Terrifying. When a poltergeist decides to start making its presence known audibly, it generally starts out as whistles or animal-like growls and whispers that slowly evolve into discernible words. Most well-documented cases of poltergeist activity never develop to a level where they demonstrate this level of communication. However, once they do, a clear personality will start to emerge from what previously seemed like a random chain of events. One of the earliest recorded cases of poltergeist activity was the Bingen poltergeist, which comes from the annals of Fulda. This incident happened near Bingen in present-day Bavaria, around 856 to 858 CE. The story goes that a farmer was plagued by a stone-throwing ghost who at first the farmer believed was just children playing pranks on him. He blamed his own children initially, before blaming other children around the village. That was until the activity took a more sinister turn when the poltergeist shook the walls of his house as though the men of the place were striking it with hammers. The entity then proceeded to set crops on fire and also shouted obscenities and accusations at the farmer, suggesting that he had sexual relations with the daughter of his foreman. The farmer was known to be a bitter old man who was anything but nice to his neighbours. The poltergeist would relentlessly follow the man wherever he went, to the extent where neighbours were so fearful of the farmer and his ghost that they would simply refuse to allow him to set foot on their property. The farmer sought out a group of Carolingian monks for aid, and although they performed an exorcism, it didn't seem to vanquish the poltergeist, which the farmer had started to believe was a demon, possibly even the devil himself sent to torture him for his sins. The farmer, armed with his suspicions, reported to the monks that the activity started with knocking and banging on walls and doors inside his home. The disturbances had been severe enough to keep his family awake all night, every night. However, the torment only escalated from there, as stones of all sizes rained down onto his roof and even through his window, at times striking him where he lay. The farmer began to believe that he had been the victim of a witch's curse, as his crops burned and turned to ash, and his livestock started to perish from a mysterious illness. Whatever the reason was for the farmer becoming a target of this poltergeist's vicious assault, it was becoming clear that the entity was hell-bent on destroying the farmer's life. Eventually, the reason for the haunting became a lot clearer when the public learned that the farmer had been molesting his own children, along with other children around the village. Some speculate that one of the children could have placed a malicious curse known as the evil eye on the farmer, or that one of his own children who was going through puberty inadvertently released a powerful supernatural force which targeted the farmer. The Bishop of Mainz sent priests with holy relics who attested to hearing the poltergeist denouncing the farmer for adultery. When the priests sang hymns and sprinkled holy water, the poltergeist responded by attacking the priests with a barrage of stones and vile curses. Whatever really happened in this case cannot be known with any real degree of certainty outside of the information that has been passed down for almost 12 centuries. It's believed that after the failed exorcism, the farmer either ran away or simply went crazy and died on the farm. The Bingham poltergeist had many typical features of a poltergeist that are still repeated in modern times. The fact that this poltergeist could talk is something that has been seen in other cases, but nevertheless, it really doesn't happen that often at all. If you're enjoying this episode so far, please do me a massive favour by clicking on the like button and subscribing to the channel. Now, on to the next story. The stunning Ballygally Castle was built back in 1625 and is steeped in history. It has been the centre of many troubles over the years. It's now a delightful hotel overlooking the shore at Antrim. The castle is said to be the haunt of the previous owner's wife, Lady Isabella Shaw. It's commonplace for a castle to have its own resident ghost, and Ballygally Castle Hotel is no different. However, this particular ghost has been haunting the castle for over 400 years. The ghost is said to be that of Lady Isabella Shaw, who was the wife of Lord James Shaw. Lord Shaw wanted a son to be his heir. However, when Lady Shaw couldn't deliver a male heir, he locked her up in a room at the top of the castle. In an escape attempt, it is believed that Lady Shaw fell to her death. Another theory is that Lord Shaw himself threw her to her death, or he paid somebody to do it. The ghost of Lady Isabella Shaw is said to be friendly and is regularly seen wandering around the castle, perhaps in search of her beloved children. There are countless reports of eerie activity around the castle, with several guests feeling a presence in their rooms, hearing unexplained noises, and witnessing the inexplicable. A mysterious green mist has also been reported hovering above the castle. Ballygally Castle Hotel is proud of its resident ghost, dedicating a room to her in one of the towers in the older part of the castle. There are small placards throughout the castle which lead you to the ghost room, a top corner turret which overlooks the Irish Sea. It's cramped, confined, and contains only a few sticks of modest furniture, a metal cot-like bed, a cabinet with a mirror, a table, and a portrait of a rather grim-faced woman. There is one window which is quite small, and another one which might just have been large enough to have suited its macabre purpose one day long ago. According to legend, James Shaw married the unfortunate Lady Isabella, who was unable to produce a male heir, only a single daughter. In anger, Shaw had her imprisoned in the turret, where, according to the story, she went crazy and leapt to her death. Another version tells of henchmen hired by the Scotsman who threw her down the steep stairs which leads to the room. Still, another claim is that Lady Isabella was having an affair with a sailor, which was discovered by Shaw, who, in a fit of jealousy, had her imprisoned in the room, where he later threw her out of the window. Since that time, her spirit is said to haunt the tiny room, sometimes making itself known by the scent of vanilla, sometimes appearing to guests in the castle part of the hotel, looking desperately for her daughter. Guests have been awakened in the night to find her standing in the middle of their room, only to watch her fade away into the darkness. According to the book, The World's Most Haunted Places by Jeff Belanger, BBC reporter Kim Lenihan was recording a piece on Ballygally Castle Hotel for a Halloween segment on the show Good Morning Ulster. Lenihan related to Belanger that she sat with a medium in the ghost room. Lenihan reported that the medium was not in a trance, but she was certainly very focused on what she was doing. The next thing that happened is the room started to get a lot warmer. I mean, significantly warmer. The temperature in the room must have gone up by 10 degrees. Then she started talking to someone, literally coinciding with the temperature going up, and a smell came. It didn't waft in. I mean, the smell came straight on almost instantly. It smelled like vanilla, but it wasn't exactly vanilla. While it was a vanilla-like smell, it was an old, slightly musty smell. Musty vanilla. I know it sounds ridiculous, but that's exactly what it was. According to Belanger's book, the medium would later explain that the spirit was that of a young woman who was scared and looking for her young daughter. The medium told Lenihan that they were keeping her there against her will, and she said there was an older woman who wouldn't let her out of the room. During the conversation, this woman continually ran to the window looking for a man named Robert, who was out at sea. The spirit didn't understand why Robert didn't come back to get her. Lenihan was planning on spending the night in that room, and the medium told her not to be afraid, as the spirit wasn't angry or malicious, just afraid. But so was Kim. She appears to be the consummate reporter, and armed with a flask of coffee, brandy, and a tape recorder, she ascended the stairs to the room, settled in, and waited. According to Miss Lenihan, around 3 a.m, the room started to get warmer again. I thought, it's the coffee and the brandy. And then, it got even warmer, and I thought, no, this isn't right. And the next thing, the smell came back, instantly. That same smell. And it was stronger than before. The smell was very intense towards my head. Yes, it was a smell, but the weirdest thing of all was it was a smell that almost covered you like a sheet. It was all pervasive. It was almost like you could feel the smell on your clothes and in your hair and on the bed. Seconds later, the reporter fled the room, and spent the rest of the night in a room as far from the turret as possible. The next morning, the staff took her back to the room, where they reported that several guests had heard knocking during the night. One reported seeing a woman in their room who faded away to nothing, and then showed her, written in the dust of the mirror in the ghost room, the name Kim. In addition to Lady Isabella, the castle part of the hotel is said to be haunted by the ghosts of one or more children. Guests have reported being woken up by small hands pushing and tugging at them in their sleep, only to wake up and find nobody there, hearing only the sound of a laughing child. More reports consist of knocking at the doors of their room in the night, followed by the laughter of children and the sound of small feet running away down the hall. The Belgian Tunnel is a motorway tunnel in Switzerland and forms part of the A2 motorway which links Basel with Lucerne. It links Eptingen in the canton of Basel Country with Hagendorf in the canton of Solothurn. The tunnel was opened in 1970 and is just over 3 kilometres long, running through the Belgian mountain and consists of 2 tunnels each with 2 lanes. In January 1981, a modern myth circulated dealing with an entity known as the White Lady of the Belgian Tunnel. In January 1981, a modern myth circulated dealing with an entity known as the White Lady of the Belgian Tunnel at the Eptingen end of the tunnel. Manifesting as a hitchhiking woman dressed all in white, an entity known locally as the White Lady appears from the hard shoulder in front of the drivers and gestures for the driver to pull over to give her a ride. The first known Belgian ghost was actually male. The first written reports of the phenomenon, dated June 1980, involve a male hitchhiker who was picked up but eventually vanished from the vehicle, despite the driver's high speed. Towards the end of 1980, the White Lady began appearing in or near the tunnel. On January 6, 1981, the tabloid Blick wrote about the sightings, followed by other media also adopting the story. Basel police received many phone calls, dozens of which had to be logged. The haunting seemed to be becoming very popular very quickly. The White Lady of Belgian Tunnel became a popular subject for 1981's Shrove Tuesday Carnival. Even the musicians of the Oberbasel-Beta Landler Kapelle discussed the legend. Reports of the ghost then dwindled, until the 1983 edition of the book Basel-Beta Sagen reported further sightings of the White Lady. The experience that seemed to be retold time and time again happened on 26th of September 1983. The ghost was picked up by 2 female jurists in Eptingen and given a lift through the tunnel. The 2 ladies said she looked roughly middle-aged and very pale. Concerned that the woman may be ill, they inquired about her health, and the lady, clad all in white, confirmed that she was not feeling well at all. The lady reportedly said, "No, unfortunately not. I'm not well at all. Something really awful is going to happen. Something very dreadful." At some point during the trip through the tunnel, the front passenger turned to inquire about the lady's health again, only to find that she had completely vanished. Now this must have been terrifying enough, but the situation becomes a whole lot more unsettling when you consider that this was a small car with only 2 doors. Completely horrified, they drove then to a restaurant called The Spanish in Harkingen and called the police. This incredibly creepy story made the Swiss newspaper headlines. Some parapsychologists have their theories on the White Lady, suggesting that the haunting could be caused by the mind of an accident victim who does not come to rest. In other words, the White Lady is the manifestation of an earth-bound spirit. Such visitations don't only happen inside or around tunnels. A re-edited edition of the Baselbieter Sagen mentions similar cases at other locations around Basel. The Heidegg Castle's Lady, the Maiden on the Goats, and the Grey Woman in Zunzgen. In Loffelfingen, the woman wears a green Loden coat. In the canton of Bern, a girl in a short leather jacket appears. In the area of Basel, as with the case in Tenniken, a man dressed all in black has been reported. This man is an omen and prophesies an earthquake and a hard winter before disappearing.
We were a very close-knit family. We was good children. We had no knowledge of the history of the house before the happenings.
When we talk about poltergeists, we think about a fear-inducing invisible force with the ability to move objects at will, often banging and knocking on walls, doors, ceilings and floors, sometimes all through the night. In the dictionary, the definition of poltergeist reads, "Poltergeist is a German word meaning noisy spirit. It refers to a disembodied spirit or supernatural force credited with certain malicious or disturbing phenomena, such as inexplicable noises, sudden wild movements, or breakage of household items." The word translates literally from German as knocking spirit. There have been many reports of poltergeist activity throughout history all over the world, but none have ever quite lived up to the hype and fear of the Enfield poltergeist. In 1977, a house in the North London suburb of Enfield was the scene of violent disturbances of apparently paranormal origin. The occurrences were similar to those reported in other cases of the poltergeist type: knockings and other noises with no apparent cause, doors opening and closing by themselves, furniture overturned, small objects hurled across rooms, picture frames ripped from walls, small fires that started and went out by themselves, and such like. The events continued for just over a year, and in many cases were witnessed by neighbours, investigators, technicians, press reporters and broadcasters, police officers and others. In its latter stages, the case was notable for the emergence of abusive and often obscene speech from the mouth of a 12-year-old girl.
Yeah.
Is anybody there?
No.
Who's there?
Doctor
Doctor Who?
Goose Chasers here.
Tape recordings were made of the voice, which was gruff and masculine, apparently that of an old man. Maurice Gross, a successful inventor, initiated an investigation soon after the start of the events on behalf of the Society for Psychical Research. Gross was soon joined by author and paranormal investigator Guy Lyon Playfair, whose 1980 book, This House is Haunted, an investigation of the Enfield poltergeist, is the main source of information about the events. Detailed and broadly accurate reports published over a period of time by the Daily Mirror led to widespread attention by other newspapers, radio and television. The house is 284 Green Street, a 3-bedroom council-owned semi-detached house dating from the 1920s. At this time, it was occupied by a family consisting of 47-year-old divorcee Peggy Hodgson and her 4 children, Margaret 13, Janet 12, John 11, and Billy 7. Peggy Hodgson was considered by those who knew her to be a pleasant and conscientious person, overcoming financial insecurity to do her best for her children. Margaret was serious and reserved. Janet, lively and extrovert. John was only at home during the school holidays and some weekends, since he boarded at a special school. Billy suffered from a severe speech defect, but in other respects was a typical little boy. Mrs. Hodgson's brother, John Burkham, a hospital worker, lived nearby at 272 Green Street with his wife Sylvia and two children, Paul and Denise. The two families appeared to be close, and John was supportive towards the Hodgsons. The Hodgsons' next-door neighbours were builder Vic Nottingham and his wife Peggy, along with their 20-year-old son Gary. Relations between the families were seen to be friendly and supportive. On the 31st of August 1977, at around 9:30 p.m, the children, Janet and John, heard shuffling in their bedroom. Their mother entered the room, and all three heard knocking sounds. A chest of drawers moved 18 inches across the room without any apparent physical contact. They immediately went to fetch help from the Nottinghams next door. Vic and Gary Nottingham entered and heard further knocks. Vic later stated that he could find no source for the knocks, which seemed to follow him around the house. At this point, Peggy Nottingham called the police. WPC Heaps and PC Hyams arrived at around 1 a.m. Heaps witnessed a chair move 3 to 4 feet across the living room floor without any physical contact. There were also further knockings. Over the next few days, marbles and toy building blocks appeared to fly around the house of their own volition, witnessed by members of the family and the Nottinghams. There followed visits by council officials, clergymen and others, but none of these deterred the phenomena, which continued unabated. On 4th of September, Mrs. Nottingham phoned the Daily Mirror in the hope it would put her in touch with someone who could help. Reporter Douglas Bence and photographer Graham Morris visited the house. Both men witnessed flying objects, and the latter was hit on the forehead by a piece of Lego travelling at speed. He insisted that the bruise was still visible for some days later. On 7th of September, senior reporter George Fellows and photographer David Thorpe visited the house. In early September, the Daily Mirror's George Fellows contacted the Society for Psychical Research and spoke to the secretary, Eleanor O'Keefe. O'Keefe got in touch with Maurice Gross, who had recently joined the organisation, and declared his willingness to act as an investigator if any interesting cases should arise. Gross was a successful inventor, responsible among many innovations for the rotating advertising billboard. His interest in paranormal phenomena had been awakened by a series of meaningful coincidences that followed the death of his daughter Janet in August 1976, of head injuries sustained during a motorcycle accident. Gross visited the house on September the 5th. He advised Mrs. Hodgson to remain calm and recommended she take notes of any incidents. On the 8th of September, Gross and 3 Daily Mirror reporters witnessed a loud crash. Convinced that Hodgson's claims were genuine, Gross decided to take on the case. During subsequent visits, he and others observed marbles that flew through the air and landed on the floor without rolling, doors and drawers that opened of their own accord, door chimes that swung, objects such as teaspoons, cardboard boxes, and a fish tank lid that jumped. The movements were witnessed by Gross, the Hodgsons, Peggy Nottingham's father, and 4 reporters and photographers from the Daily Mirror. At this relatively early stage, as many as 10 people not related to the family had witnessed the phenomena firsthand. Author and investigator Guy Playfair responded to an appeal to the SPR for assistance by Gross and arrived on the 12th of September, along with Rosalind Morris From BBC Radio 4, The World This Weekend. He and Gross worked together for more than a year, making a total of 180 visits and 25 all-night vigils at the house. The incidents at Enfield are among the most closely recorded in any poltergeist-type case. Gross, Playfair, Mrs. Hodgson, and other witnesses kept records of varying levels of detail. Tape recordings, mainly by Playfair and Gross, eventually totalled over 180 hours. An incomplete list is as follows. Marbles and pieces of Lego seen travelling through the air at great speed, seemingly emanating from the walls or windows. A teapot shook vigorously on a cabinet in the absence of any external vibration. Metal spoons bent, and the lid of a metal teapot was deformed. The shade of a bedside lamp tilted and then straightened. A toilet door opened and closed when nobody was anywhere near it. Cardboard boxes and cushions were thrown by an unknown force. A slipper was thrown across a room by an unknown source. A framed certificate was pulled off the wall. Gross, apparently, was alone in the room. A bedroom carpet was pulled up at the edge to form an identical shape each time, an effect which Gross was unable to replicate. A settee was levitated and overturned in front of several witnesses. 11-year-old Janet was levitated and deposited in different places at different times. Kitchen unit doors slid open of their own accord. Cubular door chimes swung from side to side many times. Footsteps were heard when nobody was around. 12-year-old Margaret was held fast by an unknown force. Knocks, bangs, and crashes were heard, not caused by plumbing, vibration, or other external sources. Coins disappeared from one room and reappeared in another. Small fires started and extinguished themselves without causing damage. Water appeared in circumstances not understood. Normally reliable electrical equipment, like tape recorders and cameras etc., failed to work. Apparitions were seen, partial and total. The iron frame of a built-in fireplace was wrenched from the wall. Excrement appeared in inappropriate places. There were written messages. The abusive remarks and swear words in a gruff masculine voice apparently produced by Janet, and sometimes Margaret. Some effects occurred simultaneously. Many were repeated at different times and places, both day and night. Some were seen by members of the public who in many cases had no interaction with the Hodgson family. They included John Rainbow, a local tradesman, Richard Gross, a solicitor, and Hazel Short, a road crossing council employee. Short told Playfair that she had been walking towards number 284 to pick up her lollipop sign, which she normally concealed under the hedge at the front of the house. I was standing there looking at the house, when all of a sudden a couple of books came flying across and hit the window. It was so sudden. I heard the noise because it was so quiet. There was no traffic at that time, and it really made me jump. Then, after a while, I saw Janet. I don't know if there's a bed underneath that window, but she was going up and down bodily, as though someone was just tossing her up and down in a horizontal position, like as if someone had got hold of her legs and back and was throwing her up and down. I definitely saw her come up about window height, but I thought if she was bouncing, she'd bounce from her feet. She wouldn't be able to get enough power to bounce off her back to come up that high. My friend could see her as well. We both saw her. WPC Caroline Heaps testified to the investigators as follows.
It came off the floor, or nearly a half inch I should say, and I saw it slide off to the right, about 3.5 to 4 feet before it came to rest. I checked to see whether or not it could possibly have slid along the floor. I placed a marble on the floor to see whether or not the marble would go in the same direction as the chair did, and it didn't roll at all. I checked for wires under the cushion of the chair, and I could find no explanation at all.
George Fallows, the Daily Mirror reporter, gave this account of events that he witnessed. Because of the emotional atmosphere at the house and in the neighbourhood, Ranging from hysteria through terror to excitement and tension, it has been difficult to record satisfactory data. Nevertheless, I am satisfied the overall impression of our investigation is reasonably accurate. To the best of our ability, we have eliminated the possibility of total trickery, although we have been able to simulate most of the phenomena. In my opinion, this faking could only be done by an expert. In December 1977, 3 months after the start of the disturbances, an anomalous voice began to emanate from Janet. It started as a series of whistles and dog-like barks and developed into a human voice, that of an elderly male, harsh and guttural, and quite unlike Janet's. The voice identified itself as
Bill Wilkins
and claimed that he had lived in the house. The previous occupant was in fact a Mr. Wilkins who had died in the house, a fact seemingly unknown to Janet. It habitually swore and claimed to still be living and to sleep in Janet's bed. Interrogated by Richard Gross, Maurice Gross's son, a solicitor, the voice gave further details. I went blind, and I had a hemorrhage, and I fell asleep, and I died on a chair in the corner downstairs. To eliminate the possibility that Janet was herself faking the voice, Gross taped up Janet's mouth. The voice continued to be heard, somewhat subdued, as was the case on future occasions when Janet's mouth was also filled with water. Early in January 1978, Margaret started to speak in a similar harsh voice, but without the same intensity or duration as Janet's. Many hours of recordings of the voice were made, the details of which are related in Melvin Willins' The Enfield Poltergeist tapes of 2019. A contact microphone placed on the back of Janet's head picked up what appeared to be a different and louder sound than her normal voice. A speech therapist approached by the investigators was unable to say where the sound was coming from or how it was being sustained. It had some resemblance to a false vocal cord tone. Ray Allen, a ventriloquist, felt that the voice was being produced via the diaphragm, but this was disputed by Gross and Playfair. Gross was so convinced of the paranormal origin of the effect that he offered £500, later £1,000, to a nominated charity if any child could replicate the voice under the terms he specified. Not one person accepted his offer. A variety of other methods of investigation were undertaken by a number of people between August 1977 and October 1978. Physicist John Hasted found that Janet's body increased in weight when she was strapped to a Blundell couch, devised to measure such anomalies. He reported, too, sudden 5-second weight increase signals of about 1 kg and a minute gradual weight increase which eventually returns to normal, an anomaly he was unable to explain. He was further intrigued by a light bulb that exploded in an unusual way, finding that one of the glass supports on which the filament was mounted had snapped, an event he considered very rare. Physicist David Robertson carried out experiments at Enfield. He attempted to video Janet secretly, but found it impossible to conceal the equipment from her. He reported a levitation of Janet, the teleportation of a large cushion to the house roof, the overturning of a sideboard, his head being struck by a flying plate, his hair pulled when he slept on the floor of the front room. A local psychiatrist examined the girls and maintained that if they were left alone, then the disturbances would stop. However, this did not prove to be the case. Janet was given a detailed physical and psychological assessment at London's Maudsley Institute of Neuropsychiatry by Dr. Peter Fenwick. No abnormality was discovered, such as damage to the brain or evidence of epilepsy. Hypnosis similarly failed to uncover any evidence of psychological frailty. Playfair undertook some research that found similarities between some manifestations of Tourette's syndrome, including explosive utterances, barking and swearing. When medical doctors were called out, they usually prescribed calming drugs to help Janet sleep. National press reporters, photographers and television crews used different approaches to try to uncover the reasons for the phenomena. Some introduced professional magicians to try to discover fraudulent activity. Others brought spirit mediums to make contact with the haunting entity. Gross and Playfair conceded that Margaret and Janet had sometimes tried to trick them, but insisted these occasions were very few, that they were very quickly discovered, and that the girls had then admitted their deceit. The family and direct neighbours believed the phenomena to be real. Those who knew Peggy Hodgson had no doubts about her personal integrity. This House is Haunted was published in 1980. It was reviewed skeptically by Anita Gregory, a SPR member and investigator who had visited Enfield with John Beloff in December 1977. The pair argued that the girls enjoyed play acting. Gregory alleged that John Burkham told her that Janet taught herself the trick of talking in a deep voice, and that she enjoyed keeping strangers hopping about. Gregory also stated that Peggy Nottingham had told her that what was going on now was pure nonsense, and it was kept going by the investigators. In a later response to Gregory, Gross defended himself against her criticisms, and pointed out that she had conceded the case included some good evidence and testimony, being answered in turn by Gregory with more criticisms, including a complaint about the lack of evidential video footage. Towards the end of his life, Gross was much occupied with defending his investigation of the Enfield events, writing articles for a wide range of publications and speaking at conferences. In 1995, he took part in an edition of popular ITV television programme Strange But True with presenter Michael Aspel. Gross appeared in a French documentary The Strange Odyssey in 1995. He was interviewed by a Japanese film company in 1996, at which time Terry Wilkins, son of the former occupant of the Enfield house, and putative entity Bill Wilkins, confirmed that his father had indeed died in the house many years earlier, in the circumstances that Janet's voice had described. Gross died in 2006. Playfair remained an active researcher, author and SPR Council member, almost until his death in 2018. He vigorously defended the legitimacy of the investigation and the claims of paranormality. In 2007, he took the Times to task for making unfounded comments about the case. Peggy Hodgson died in 2003. Her older son John died in 1981 at just 14 years of age. Janet left home at 16, married young, and suffered the loss of her own son when he was aged just 18. Asked in a newspaper article in 2011 whether she believes the house was still haunted, Janet said, "Years later, when Mum was alive, there was always a presence there, something watching over you." Janet, who at this time was aged 45, mentioned having been bullied at school as a result of the incidents, being nicknamed Ghost Girl. She also mentioned having played with an Ouija board before the trouble flared up. She said that she had been unaware that she went into trances until she'd been shown the photographs. I knew when the voices were happening, of course. It felt like something was behind me all of the time. They did all sorts of tests, filling my mouth with water and so on, but the voices still came out. The levitation was scary because you didn't know where you were going to land. I remember a curtain being wound around my neck. I was screaming. I thought I was going to die. After the death of Peggy Hodgson, the house was briefly occupied by mother of four Claire Bennett, who stated, "I didn't see anything, but I felt uncomfortable. There was definitely some kind of presence in the house. I always felt like someone was looking at me." Her sons would wake up in the night hearing people talking downstairs. Bennett then found out about the house's history. "Suddenly, it all made sense," she said. The family moved out after just 2 months.
And we could hear this shuffling noise near the bedroom door. at the bottom of my bed stood a chest of drawers, and the chest of drawers started shuffling and it moved towards the door, and me and my brother Johnny were both sat up and we was really frightened. And Mum came in and put the light on. She said, "What's all this noise about?" And we said, Mum, the chest of drawers is moving." And she see it again, she see it shuffling towards the doorway, and she pushed it back, and then it started to shuffle out again, and she couldn't push it back. There was levitation, there was the voices, and then there was like incidents that happened to me that were like the curtain which wrapped itself around my neck, which was quite life-threatening for me. And it brought it home to me that this could kill you. I feel that it became to use me, maybe because it was drawn off of my energy. Maybe. I mean, I often think, why me? To sum it all up, to weigh it up all in one, I was used and abused. When Ed and Lorraine came to the house, to me it felt like some sort of comfort had arrived for the first time. In the respect that they come to try and help us. And it didn't feel like that when anyone else visited. They just seemed to visit to see what was going on and to witness something that was happening. But Ed and Lorraine, you felt warm and comforted, but they were there to try and find out what it was and how they could help you. I know people say, and I don't care what they say, it wasn't them, it was me. I know what happened and I know it was real.
Well, that's all for today. I really hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, then please do me a huge favour by clicking on the like button and subscribing to the channel for a feast of grim and grisly content. Please also leave any thoughts on today's stories in the comments section. I always try my very best to respond to any comments. As always, thanks for watching. I'm your host, Severed Soul.